Welcome to Before You Vote. I'm Mike Broomhead. This CW7 special program is here to help you, the voter, understand the 2024 primary election. We'll be talking with candidates and data analysts to give you insight into who and what is on the ballot. Now, today, we're talking with some of the Republican candidates in the Maricopa County Sheriff's race. Now, to clarify the job of the sheriff, they are the chief law enforcement officer in the county. They also run the jail system, and they patrol the unincorporated areas where law enforcement isn't always available. Now, today, we're talking with Republican Jerry Sheridan, a former chief deputy in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And then we talk with Republican candidate Mike Crawford, who has over 37 years experience in law enforcement and in the military. Later in the show, we're giving you a news recap for the week. How will the Biden plan to increase tariffs on Chinese products affect you? It's a show you don't want to miss. We'll be back here on Before You Vote in exactly 60 seconds. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, obviously one of the biggest races in the state. Joining us is Republican candidate Jerry Sheridan. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
You've spent a lifetime in law enforcement and with the Sheriff's Office. Talk about the office and what you think you have uniquely qualified to be the sheriff in Maricopa County.
Okay. You know, Maricopa County Sheriff's fourth largest sheriff's office in the country. 75% of the sheriff's office is the jail system. A lot of people don't realize that. It's supposed to have about 4,000 employees. Currently, it's in bad shape. It's got maybe 1,400 employees short. Over 1,000 of those are in the jail. Patrol deputies are at 50% staffing. It's on the verge of collapse. So the reason I'm running for sheriff is because the people that work there asked me to. They asked me to in 2020, and they asked me to again.
What is it going to take to bring staffing back? Now, there's a lot of agencies that are struggling with staffing, but what is it uniquely about the sheriff's office that you think needs to happen to get both of those places up to where they need to be?
Well, I'm going to answer that a little bit different than you asked it, because law enforcement across the country is short-staffed, and so is the military. And think about this for a second. Young people, there's no shortage that want to get into law enforcement today, but they don't want to work for weak leaders. So I use two examples. Number one, the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, I would think that the military would think he's weak. And the other example is many people left MCSO to go work in Pinell County because they have a strong sheriff down there, Mark Lamb. And that's why, and Mark Lamb's got a waiting list, and those deputies get paid significantly less than our deputies here in Maricopa County. So it's about leadership. I bring leadership to the table. I've got a master's degree. I've taught leadership for 22 years at the college. I went to the FBI National Academy, the best leadership training for law enforcement in the world. Plus, I spent 33 of the 40 years I had with MCSO with stripes on my sleeve or bars and stars on my collar. And 20 of those years were in an executive leadership position. But before you get excited, I made rank behind the desk. I also spent 17 years in a patrol car.
Then you are uniquely qualified. The diversity of the sheriff's department, it's densely urban in some areas, it's very rural in others. So what are some of the challenges you think the sheriff's office is facing as far as the crime fighting? What are the priorities of the office to the citizens of Maricopa County?
Okay. The number one priority is we got to get those jails back online. And the reason I bring the jails up, because there's nobody. I ran those jails for 12 years. I oversaw the construction design of 4th Avenue Jail, Lower Buckeye Jail, Food Factory. It was the largest construction project ever undertaken. I did that as the chief of custody. When the sheriff gave me the job, I was kind of overwhelmed, but I spent 12 years doing that. There's no other candidate that has that experience. And again, 75% of the personnel, 80% of the sheriff's budget. I ran that. And then for the next 6 years when I was the chief deputy, so I spent a total of 18 years overseeing those jails. It is a big job, and nobody's up to that task. You know that 49 people a year die in custody at MCSO? When I was in charge, we averaged 7 deaths a year, which 7 too many, but 49 is absolutely horrendous. That needs to stop. That's a number one priority for me. Law enforcement, you asked about law enforcement. We've got a border. Our southern border is I-8, Gila Bend, the Vico Valley, 70 miles straight shot to the Mexican border. When I became the chief deputy in 2010, I had detectives out there, the drug interdiction unit. They were killing it out there. They were dismantled the drug cartels and human smuggling, child sex trafficking, all that stuff. When I left, about 2 weeks later in 2017, this current administration took those detectives out of the desert. There's been nobody coming in since then. Nobody down there to do anything to stop the drugs coming in. You know, 6 people a day die in Maricopa County due to drug overdoses, 4 of them for fentanyl overdose. And nobody's been down there at least trying to stop this stuff coming in, poisoning our families and our friends.
Since you've left the sheriff's office, they have introduced machines to look for fentanyl into the jails, and it includes employees. How do you feel about that program? Do you think it was the right thing to do?
Again, I ran, Rose jails for 18 years. And in those 18 years, we had 2 employees, and one was a nurse and one was a detention officer in 18 years. I thought it was a slap in the face to all the detention officers when this current administration didn't trust them all of a sudden because of one person. And when I started the jail system, I started a jail intelligence unit, and they worked cases to avoid escapes, to find contraband, solve murder cases for Phoenix PD, and they were intelligence gatherers. Those officers are gone because there are over 1,000 officers short. None of that's going on right now. And so my goal is to let people know what kind of leader I am, and that don't know, because a lot of them do. Can I read this real quick?
We're just about out of time, so go ahead very quickly.
Oh, okay. All right, this is from an officer. I am currently an MCSO detention officer who had the whole absolute privilege to meet you on many occasions. I will say that you are undoubtedly the kindest, most approachable member of MCSO command staff that I have ever encountered in almost 19 years of service. Your genuine concern for the staff is obvious, and at least on my part, heartfelt. You are far and away the most qualified person to lead this organization in the future. This is why I decided to run again. Mike, I spent 40 years there. I've got a cabin up north, the horses, my wife's my best friend, I do a lot of photography. I don't need this job, but I need it in here because I have the passion to turn MCSO around, and it needs someone with my experience and my passion to do that.
I appreciate the time, wish you well in your campaign, and it's good to see you again. Jerry Sheridan, candidate for sheriff, will be back. Coming up next, how will Biden's plan to increase tariffs on Chinese products affect you? Then later in the show, Republican candidate Mike Crawford talks about his campaign for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. This is Before You Vote. All right, let's talk about what's going on around the country and here locally. Let's start in Arizona. There are some new developments that have happened in the abortion ruling. If you remember, the abortion ruling happened. We defaulted back to a law that was originally written back in 1864. Well, the Supreme Court was petitioned, the Arizona Supreme Court was petitioned, and they agreed on a 90-day stay of that law, which means it cannot be enforced until sometime in August. And what that does is a couple of things. It allows the Attorney General time to decide how she wants to proceed. Does she want to appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court? All of these things happening here in the state of Arizona, meaning that this could not be enforced ever, possibly, depending on when the session ends here in Arizona. And then, of course, we have the ballot initiative that everybody's been talking about. And that ballot initiative, it looks like it's going to be on the ballot, would dramatically change the rules anyway. But this would give time between now and the end of session and then that 90 days so that, therefore, it may never be enforced. That's the update on abortion. On the national front, the President of the United States is maybe going to get us into a trade war with China. He is increasing the tariffs on Chinese goods dramatically. Just a couple listed here. Steel and aluminum will move from 7.5% to 25% in a tariff. Electric vehicle tariffs increase from 25% to 100%. And there are a lot more in this list. where we are seeing big increases on Chinese goods. Of course, the fear is if the Chinese retaliate on American goods, what could that do to the U.S. economy and our export business? Also, does it mean higher prices for you? The White House says it's protecting American industries because Americans will now buy American-made goods. But if we are buying Chinese goods, are we going to see much higher prices? We've already seen dramatic inflation. This is going to be the battle that everybody is talking about. So that is a big concern for a lot of people. And now finally, let's talk about the debates. President Biden said he would debate Donald Trump, the former president, twice. They have set up for one in June with CNN, and another one will happen in September on ABC. The Trump campaign has said they would agree to a third debate in October, and they would want to do that in a Fox News debate. The Biden camp has not talked about that. Now, with all of this being said, the Biden campaign, understanding the challenges and the concerns about the Biden camp and his ability to do the job, he could gain a lot of ground here if he performs well in those debates. On the other side of this, what issues will be debated? Will they talk about the border? Will this devolve into a personal insults? That's what people are going to watch for. What will the real issues be talked about, and how often, or does this devolve into personal attacks? That's always a big concern for people. So that's what we have here in our news update. We'll be back here in a moment on Before You Vote. Coming up, I sit down with Republican candidate Mike Crawford. Find out what his plan is for the office if he is elected. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote, our ongoing conversations with candidates for Maricopa County Sheriff. Joining us is Republican candidate Mike Crawford. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the job. I mean, starting with all the candidates, same question. Describe the job from your perspective and what unique qualifications you think you bring to the job.
So the job's difficult with the DOJ oversight, of course. It's been going on since 2010. We've paid out over $300 million in taxpayer money, and that has to stop. It's just raping the taxpayers. We have to shut that down. We have to bring Maricopa County Sheriff's Office up to the standard it should have been it all along. I worked at an accredited agency here in the Valley at the Glendale Police Department. I know what it's like to bring a department to above standards, and that's a unique experience that I have that some of the other candidates don't. And we can bring MCSO up to standard and then above and turn MCSO into a family like it should be.
One of the questions, since you're on the, and I'm glad you brought up the topic of the DOJ oversight, is that the accusation is it's kind of a moving target, that it's almost set up as a system where it isn't set up for success. Do you believe the right person in the job, and how long do you think it would take to bring it up to standard and get the DOJ out? Any idea?
As far as a timeline, it's probably going to take the first term. First 4 years, because once you come into compliance and meet all the standards that were set by the court, you have to stay in compliance for at least 3 years for it to time out and go away. So it's going to take at least a year to come into compliance and then maintain for 3 years, and then it goes away. So it's a minimum 4 years.
So let's talk about the other challenges of being the sheriff of such a large county. What do you think those biggest challenges are day one that you have to address outside of the DOJ oversight? What is the job of the sheriff in your perspective, and what needs to be done day one?
Day one, we have to audit the sheriff's office. The budget's more than doubled in the last 7-8 years, and I want to know where that money's gone. All that taxpayer money has gone somewhere. It hasn't gone to supplying more deputies. We've actually decreased the number of deputies on the road and the number of detention officers in the jail system there. It's the 4th largest jail system in the United States. Maricopa County Jail is the 3rd largest mental health facility in the United States.
I didn't know that. That's a new statistic for me. So when you look at that challenge, let's talk about the dichotomy. One is deputies on the road. The other is that jail system. And you add into that the fentanyl crisis. What is it about the jail system you think that needs to change to make it better and safer?
Number one, we have to have more detention officers. They don't have backup, and they're actually operating outside the bounds of what their policy states. They need more detention officers in the jail to make things safer for the detention officers and for the inmates.
So what is it about staffing? Because I think everyone on law enforcement I've talked to addresses staffing, because if you're in law enforcement, you understand staffing's an issue. What can Maricopa County do? What can the sheriff do to make it more of an attractive agency to work for, as far as being a deputy on the road or a corrections officer, or detention officer inside the jail?
Leadership. They need a true leader. I was a non-commissioned officer in the military. I know how to lead people. People are attracted to good leaders. And like Mark Lamb down in Pinal County, he has people lined up that want to work for him. They don't pay the best, but it's a good job. It's the same job at MCSO, but they need a good leader that people will follow. People will flock to a good leader.
The challenges of the diversity of the sheriff's office, densely urban areas where you're supporting municipalities and agencies. You're also the chief law enforcement officer in the county, but you've also in unincorporated areas. How do you work that challenge, and what training do you think is necessary? Is there new training necessary to keep the deputies better at their job and safer out in the community?
Well, mostly with the deputies on the road, it's the continued training, making sure that they have the tools that they need to stay linked with the community, and we need more deputies in these huge districts that they have. Break them up into smaller beats so that these deputies aren't having to travel 20 to 30 minutes between calls just to service their calls, and they don't even have time to do any proactive patrolling.
A lot of questions in Arizona about law enforcement and issues at the border. Maricopa County is not a border county, but a lot of the traffic, whether it's fentanyl or otherwise, comes through Maricopa County. What does the sheriff do to address those issues?
Well, one of our biggest problems here in Maricopa County is our amazing infrastructure. We have an interstate highway system and a rail system that the cartels use against us. Maricopa County is a hub, and they use that to disperse their human trafficking and drug trafficking. So it's a central hub for them to collect, and there's safe houses here where they collect everything, and then it gets dispersed all through the country. So as a focal point, we need to shut down that hub, and the border between Pinal County and Maricopa County is a massive problem with the cartels bringing drugs and their sex trafficking issues from Pinal into Maricopa County. That is a border issue that we have that we need to shut down.
Talk about the relationship between the sheriff and the city agencies that it works with, and the federal with the JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Forces. What does that relationship looks like if you're sitting in the sheriff's office?
We work together with multiple task forces, human sex trafficking task forces, drug task forces, and the sheriff can be a pivotal role person and guidance for these task forces, and can guide other agencies to focus on these specific problems and gather the personnel and the equipment that we need to target specific issues that we're having.
I appreciate the time. I know it's an important role, and we wanted to get perspective from the candidates. I appreciate this and wish you well in your campaign.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Mike Crawford. He is a Republican candidate for sheriff. We'll be back on Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Thank you to Maricopa County Sheriff candidates Jerry Sheridan and Mike Crawford. Now, next week, we're talking with Republican candidate for sheriff Frank Milstead. Plus, former Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone will join us to talk about his time in that office. Thanks for joining us this week. We will see you next Sunday right here on Before You Vote. To help you this election season, head over to cw7arizona.com, check out your voter status, register to vote, as well as all other voter resources.